Okay, what I'm going to do for you today is 3 examples of solving quadratic equations by completing the square. When you're solving a quadratic equation, what you're doing is finding the zeros of that equation. And if you want to think of that visually, it would be where the parabola crosses the x-axis. Okay, and it's usually in 2 spots. So we are going to get 2 different answers on all 3 of these questions. The first one's going to be a very simple one. You always want to start off with your quadratic in standard form, which it is right now. It goes x squared as your first term, then the x term in the middle, and then the term without an x value third. You have to have the first term with a coefficient of 1, which we do in this case, so this is going to be a nice simple one. So the first thing you're going to want to do is create a whole, and we're going to do that by subtracting 4 to both sides. And we're going to be left with x squared plus 6x plus blank, leave yourself a little room there, equals -4. Now we're going to fill in this number, in this blank, with a number so that this left-hand side becomes a perfect square trinomial. Okay, that's our whole goal. Now the trick is it's very simple to find. Okay, what you do is you take your middle term, the 6, the coefficient is 6 in this one, okay, and we're going to, off to the side here, we're going to divide 6 by 2, and we get 3. Then what we're going to do is take 3 squared, which is 9. Now we're going to add 9 to both sides of the equation, okay, and we're allowed to do that because you are allowed to add any number that you want to an equation so long as you add it to both sides of the equation. Now we're going to factor the left-hand side, okay, and what you're doing is thinking of numbers that multiply to give you 9 and add to give you 6. So in this case it's +3 and +3, and that's going to equal 5, right? -4 plus 9. We're going to rewrite the left-hand side as x plus 3 quantity squared. And then we're going to just take the square root of both of the sides. And this is where our two answers are going to come from. On the left, we're left with x plus 3. And on the right-hand side, we're going to get a positive and a negative square root of 5. Okay, now we're almost done. We're just going to subtract 3 from both sides. And we're left with x equaling -3 plus or minus the square root of 5. Okay, on our second example, we have another quadratic in standard form. We have the first term having a coefficient of 1, so it's not really that much different. The only difference is that our middle term is not an even number, so we're going to have to deal with a fraction. Okay, but we're going to start off the same way. We're going to add 3 to both sides. And we have x squared plus 5x plus our blank equaling 3. Okay, we're going to go off to the side here and divide 5 by 2. Okay, there's really nothing that's going to happen. You don't want to change this into a decimal. Okay, we're going to leave it like that, and then we're going to square it. And we get 25 over 4. Now what I suggest is when you add this to both sides, you leave the left-hand side in the form that it is on the left here, the 5 over 2 squared. Okay, so what we're going to have is x squared plus 5x plus 5 halves squared equals 3 plus 25 over 4. Now the reason that I suggest you leave it this way is because there's a shortcut into the factoring. No one wants to sit around thinking of numbers that multiply to give you 5 over 2 and add to give you 5. So here's the little trick that makes this a very simple process. We're just going to say x we're going to take the sign of the middle term. This is very important. Okay, so it's going to be plus, and now we're just going to write the 5/2 squared. Okay, and if you don't believe that that works, go ahead and FOIL this out, and you'll see that you get you get x squared plus 5x plus 25 over 4. Okay, what we're going to do over here, write 3 with a common denominator of 4 would be 12 over 4 plus 25 over 4. So we have x plus 5/2 squared equals 37 over 4. Take the square root of both sides. X plus 5/2 equals, don't forget that it's a positive and a negative, square root of 37 over 4. Okay, that's going to simplify to x plus 5/2 equaling positive or negative square root of 37 over 2. We're going to subtract the 5/2 from both sides and have negative 5/2 plus or minus the square root of 37 over 2. Okay, I'm going to leave it as 2 fractions on this one. On the next example, I'm going to combine that into 1, which would probably what you're going to see more often. I don't know, maybe not. Okay, so this is about as hard as it's going to get, right? We do have it in standard form already, but if you notice, our first term's coefficient is not 1, and we need to take care of that before we do anything. So if you want to multiply and divide by any number, you're allowed to do that so long as you hit every term by what you're doing. So our first step is going to be to divide all these terms by 3. Okay, and we're left with x squared plus 7 over 3x minus 2/3 equals 0. Okay, now we're just going to go through the step. Nothing's going to be any different now. We're going to add the 2/3 to both sides. We have x squared plus 7 over 3x plus our blank equals 2/3. We're going to take our b term, our 7 over 3. We're going to divide it in half, and I'm going to multiply by 1 over 2, which is the same thing. And you get 7 over 6. We're going to take that and square it and get 49 over 36. And we're going to add that to both sides. Again, I would just add this to the left-hand side. It's going to be much easier to factor that way. So what we have is x squared plus 7/3 x plus 7 over 6 squared equals 2/3 plus 49 over 36. Okay, the left-hand side is going to factor just as easy as it was before, even though there's a lot of fractions around. Doesn't make it any more difficult now. Right, we're going to take the sign of the middle term. We're going to write the 7/6 quantity squared. That's going to equal, right, we're going to want to add these two together. So we need a common denominator of 36. So we multiply 2/3 top and bottom by 12. So you have 24 over 36 plus 49 over 36. And that's going to give you 73 over 36. Take the square root of both sides. We have x plus 7 over 6 equals a positive and a negative square root of 73 over 6. Now when we subtract 7 over 6 from both sides, I'm going to write this in one fraction, right? We have a common denominator of 6. So you're going to say x equals negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 73 all over 6. And that's about all the examples you really need on completing the square. That takes care of about any situation that you would see.